The room is quiet. Too quiet. A single light hums above a narrow bed. The walls are the color of old paper, stained by time. Somewhere behind thick steel doors, a clock is ticking. Each second lands heavy, like a footstep coming closer. A man sits alone. He has been here longer than many people live their entire lives. When he first walked into a prison cell, he was still a teenager, barely grown, barely understood what the rest of his life would look like. Now his hair is gray. His hands shake when he clasps them together. The world outside has changed so much that it would feel like another planet. This is not the story of a crime. This is the story of time, and what it does to a human being when the state promises, year after year, that one day it will kill you. Before we go any further, pause for a second. Stories like this matter. They disappear if people don't care. If you want more real documentaries told like movies, slow, deep, and honest, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice keeps stories like this alive. The promise of death didn't come suddenly. It came wrapped in paper, court documents, legal words too big for a young mind to fully understand. When the sentence was read, the room blurred. He heard only pieces. Guilty, death, order of the court. He was 19. At that age, most people worry about school, money, love, or what they want to become. He was handed a number and walked down a long hallway where doors slammed shut behind him, one by one. Death row is not like the movies. There are no dramatic speeches every day. No constant screaming. Mostly, there is waiting. Endless waiting. At first, he thought it wouldn't last long. Appeals, lawyers, something would fix it. That's what people told him. This takes time, they said. Years. They didn't tell him how many. Days on death row follow a strange rhythm. Wake up. Count. Eat. Wait. Count again. Lights off. Repeat. The cell never changes, but the person inside it does. Slowly. Quietly. Outside, seasons passed. Presidents changed. New laws were written. New machines were invented. Inside, the walls stayed the same. He learned how to listen to silence. How to mark time without calendars. He memorized the sounds of the prison. Keys, boots, distant doors, because those sounds were his only warning system. On death row, every sound could mean something, especially footsteps that stopped outside your door. Years passed, then more years. At some point, he stopped counting birthdays. Letters became his lifeline. Some came from family, some from strangers who had read about his case in a small newspaper article buried on page 6. Some stopped coming altogether. People move on. Life doesn't pause just because someone is waiting to die. His body aged in ways he didn't expect. His eyesight faded. His back hurt from a bed built for punishment, not rest. He developed habits meant only to survive small spaces, walking in circles, repeating prayers, talking softly to himself so he wouldn't forget his own voice. Every appeal brought hope, and every denial took something away. Hope doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks out slowly, like air from a tire. At first, you don't notice. Then one day, you realize you can't go any farther. What made his case different wasn't just how young he was when it began. It was how long the system held on to him. Decade after decade, courts reviewed his file. Judges retired. Lawyers changed. Evidence was re-examined, then locked away again. The question lingered in the background, never spoken out loud in the courtroom, but whispered everywhere else. What does it mean to punish someone for almost their entire life before killing them? Death row isn't just about execution. It's about anticipation. Living every day knowing there is an end date, but never knowing exactly when it will arrive. It's a psychological weight that presses down harder with each passing year. Some men broke under it. He saw it happen. Men who stopped speaking. Men who stopped eating. Men who begged for execution just to end the waiting. He didn't beg. He waited. There were moments, small ones, when life slipped through the cracks. A guard who treated him like a human. A book that made him forget where he was. A letter that smelled like the outside world. These moments didn't save him, but they reminded him he was still alive. As time passed, his case became older than some of the people reviewing it. Files yellowed. Records were transferred from paper to computers. What once felt urgent slowly became routine. And then, one day, something changed. The tone of the conversations shifted. Lawyers spoke more carefully. Guards became more formal. The prison routine tightened, just slightly. No one said the words out loud, but everyone felt it. The waiting was almost over. If this story already has you thinking, pause here and tell me in the comments. Do you believe someone can truly be judged at 19 for the rest of their life? I read every comment. In the weeks that followed, his world grew smaller. Choices disappeared. Meals were watched. Movements were noted. Even silence felt monitored. This is how death row signals the end, quietly, politely, without ceremony. He was no longer just an inmate. He was a schedule. Outside the prison walls, debates continued. Some said justice delayed was justice denied. Others asked if this was justice at all. But inside, none of that mattered anymore. The machine had started moving, and machines do not stop easily. He sat on his bed and thought about the boy he used to be. The one who didn't understand how long a lifetime could feel when you're locked inside concrete and steel. The one who thought 19 was old enough to understand everything. He wondered if the system remembered that boy at all. Because soon, very soon, the state would meet the man he had become. The night before everything changes does not feel dramatic. There is no thunder, no warning sound. Just paperwork moving quietly through offices, signatures drying on pages, and decisions made far away from the small concrete room where he sits. By now, he knows the signs. The guards speak less. When they do, their voices are softer, almost careful. His movements are watched more closely. Every routine action feels heavier, as if the air itself has thickened. Death row has a way of announcing the end without saying a word. He has been here for decades. Long enough to watch men arrive full of anger and leave in silence. Long enough to see hope rise and collapse over and over again. Long enough to understand that the system never rushes, but when it decides, it does not hesitate. The case that put him here is old. Older than many of the officers walking these halls. It happened in a different world, before smartphones, before social media, before news traveled in seconds. Back then, information moved slowly, and mistakes could sleep for years without being noticed. At 19, he did not know how the system worked. He trusted that truth, once spoken, would be enough. He learned too late that courts don't move on truth alone. They move on procedure, on deadlines, on whether the right words were said at the right time. Over the years, lawyers came and went. Some were passionate. Some were exhausted. Some believed deeply that the system would correct itself. Others quietly warned him not to expect miracles. Each appeal followed the same pattern. Hope would arrive first, then weeks of waiting, then months, then a letter, always a letter, denied. The reasons were often technical. A form filed too late, an argument raised too early, evidence deemed not new enough. The words felt cold, almost mechanical. None of them talked about who he was now. None of them asked what decades of waiting had done to his mind. The system does not measure time the way humans do. On death row, time stretches. Days feel long, but years vanish. He watched his reflection change in the small mirror bolted to the wall. Lines appeared, hair thinned. His hands, once steady, now trembled slightly when he held a pen. He wrote anyway. Letters became his way of staying human. He wrote to family, even when replies stopped coming. He wrote to strangers who reached out with questions, prayers, or doubts about his guilt. He wrote because writing meant he still existed beyond his cell. Sometimes he wrote about the past. Other times, about nothing at all. The future was the hardest topic. It felt dangerous to imagine. And yet, as the final legal doors closed, imagination became unavoidable. He thought about food he would never taste again, streets he would never walk, sounds he would never hear, technology he didn't understand, a world that had moved forward while he stayed frozen in one place. He also thought about the crime, not just what happened, but how it was remembered, how a single moment had defined everything that followed, how people reduced his life to one headline, one verdict, one sentence. There is a strange cruelty in waiting to die for most of your life. Some say it is mercy. That time allows reflection, remorse, growth. Others say it is torture, stretching fear across decades, forcing a person to rehearse their own death thousands of times. He never had a choice in that debate. As the execution date approached, preparations began quietly. Medical checks, inventory lists, conversations he was never meant to hear. Death row has its own rhythm at the end, slower, more deliberate, as if the system wants to appear calm. Inside, he was anything but. Sleep came in pieces. Memories surfaced without warning. Faces from his youth appeared in dreams, then vanished before he could speak to them. Regret mixed with confusion. Acceptance fought against fear. He was not the same person who entered this place. That fact sat heavy on his mind. At 19, his brain was still forming. He reacted quickly, thought emotionally. Like most teenagers, he believed he understood the world far more than he actually did. Now, decades later, he saw everything differently. Slower, deeper, with the weight of time behind each thought. But the law does not age with you. It freezes you at the moment of your worst decision or your worst accusation and judges you forever by that version of yourself. In his final meetings, he was asked familiar questions. Did he want a last meal? Did he want a spiritual advisor? Did he have final statements prepared? Each question felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. He answered calmly. He had learned that emotion did not change outcomes. Only processes mattered now. Word of the execution reached the outside world. Articles appeared. Activists argued. Supporters pleaded. Critics insisted the law had already spoken. Everyone had an opinion, except the man whose life was ending. He had said all he could say years ago. If this moment makes you think differently about justice, pause here and subscribe. And in the comments, answer this honestly. Is waiting decades to die a punishment or something worse? These conversations matter more than you think. As the final hours approached, the prison grew still. Even the sounds he had memorized over decades seemed softer now. Footsteps slowed. Doors closed gently. Time itself appeared to hesitate. He sat alone and reflected on the strange truth of his life. He had grown up, grown old, and grown tired inside a place designed to end him. He had learned patience where there was no reward for it, strength where it made no difference. And still, the system moved forward. Soon, he would be transferred, not to freedom, not to another cell, but to a room built for one purpose only. What happened there would be recorded carefully, witnessed officially, documented thoroughly. But what happened inside him, across 37 years of waiting, would never fully fit into any report. The boy sentenced to die at 19 was gone. The man who remained had lived an entire lifetime on death row. And now, the final chapter of that lifetime was about to begin. Morning arrives without sunlight. The cell door opens, and for a moment, nothing happens. No rush, no force, just a quiet pause, as if the prison itself is taking a breath. Then the routine begins, careful and exact, the same way it has been done for years. He is told to stand, to turn, to place his hands where instructed. These movements are familiar. He has done them thousands of times. But today, every small action carries a weight it never had before. There will be no return to this cell. No more counting days. No more letters waiting to be answered. The walk begins. The hallway is longer than he remembers. Or maybe it only feels that way. Walls pass slowly. Doors blur together. He notices details he has never noticed before. Scratches in the paint. The sound of his own breathing. The echo of footsteps that do not belong to him alone. There are witnesses waiting. Officials. Medical staff. People whose job is to observe, not interfere. They will later describe this moment in calm, formal language. They will not describe what it feels like to be here. He is seated. Straps are secured. Not tight enough to hurt, just firm enough to remove choice. This is how the system shows restraint, by being gentle at the end. Someone reads a statement. Words about justice, about law, about closure. The language is practiced, polished by repetition. It has been spoken many times before, to many people who waited just as long. He listens, but the words drift past him. His thoughts are elsewhere. He thinks about how strange it is that his life has been measured in documents. Arrest reports, trial transcripts, appeal briefs, execution protocols. Thousands of pages that try to explain who he is, yet somehow never quite do. He thinks about the years in between, the years that never appear in any file. No document records the nights he couldn't sleep, or the mornings he woke up surprised to still be alive. No report explains how hope can fade without fully disappearing, leaving behind something quieter and heavier. The final question comes. Does he have anything to say? For decades, people have spoken for him. Prosecutors, judges, journalists, commentators. Everyone had words. Now, finally, the room is quiet enough for his. What he says is not dramatic. It is not long. It does not sound like a movie speech. It sounds like a man who has spent most of his life thinking about the same moment. He speaks about time, about how long it has been, about how people change, about how he is not the boy who entered prison all those years ago. He does not beg. He does not shout. He simply states what is true. The process moves forward. A signal is given. A machine is activated. The room watches carefully, trained to notice signs, to record details, to confirm outcomes. Everything happens exactly as planned, exactly as written. The state carries out its sentence. When it is over, a doctor steps forward, checks for signs of life, makes an official declaration. A time is recorded. That is how the system ends a life, with precision, not emotion. Outside the prison, the world continues. Cars move, phones buzz, people go to work. For most, this day is like any other. News of the execution spreads quickly. Headlines appear. Some are short, some are detailed. Many focus on the crime. Some mention the years on death row. Few try to explain what those years actually mean. Supporters mourn. Critics argue. Families on all sides feel something different: relief, anger, sadness, emptiness. There is no single reaction that fits a moment like this. And then, slowly, attention shifts. The case becomes history, but there is something about long death row cases that lingers. They leave questions behind, questions that do not have clean answers. What is the purpose of punishment if it lasts longer than a generation? What does justice mean when a person grows old waiting for it? Can a sentence handed down to a teenager truly account for the person they become decades later? These questions are not theoretical. They live in the space between the boy who entered prison and the man who left it. For 37 years, the system kept him alive with one clear promise: someday, it would end him. That promise shaped every part of his existence, every decision, every thought about the future. Some argue that time served is irrelevant, that the sentence was clear from the start. Others say that the waiting itself became a separate punishment, one never formally acknowledged. The law, however, does not debate itself. It closes the file. Years later, people still search his name. Students study the case. Documentaries revisit the timeline. Viewers ask the same question over and over. How does someone survive knowing the exact way their life will end? The answer is uncomfortable. You don't survive it. You endure it, day by day, year by year, until endurance becomes your entire identity. The man executed that morning had lived longer on death row than many people live free. He had watched the world reinvent itself while he stayed still. He had aged, reflected, learned, and changed inside a place that never expected him to grow. And that may be the quietest truth of all. The system punished a 19-year-old, but it executed a 56-year-old who had already lived a full lifetime in confinement. What remains now is not just a verdict or an execution date, but a story about time, responsibility, and what society chooses to do when punishment outlasts youth itself. One final piece remains, not about what happened that day, but about what it means after.
After the execution, the prison returns to routine faster than anyone expected. The leader switch back to normal schedules. Meals are reserved on tune. Guards change shifts. Another name is removed from a list, and empty space quickly waits to be filled. The institutions are buoyant to absorb endings without slowing down. But outside the close walls, the story does not end so easily. Records remain, transcripts, appeals, that is written in careful order. On paper, the case logs net trim, trial, sentence, execution, a straight line from beginning to end. What the paper cannot show is the space between those lines. The decades where a human life continued, day after day. Under the shadow of future already decided. For some people, the execution status a fairy tale. They believe justice has been completed, exactly as promised. The law spoke, time passed, and the sentence was carried over, and off story. For others, the questions begin only after it is over. They look at the numbers and pause. Minute 10 years old at sentencing, 56 at execution, 37 years spent waiting. They imagine what their own lives looked like over that same span of time. Strong, work, love, lost children, adding parents, changing dreams. Then they imagine all of that happening inside the cell. The death penalty debate often focuses on guilt or innocence, on victims and accountability, on law and order, but long death row cases force a different question into the open. On that makes people uncomfortable. What happens when punishment lasts longer than youth itself? Herman at the center of the story entered prison before his mind had fully matured. Since now tells us that the human brain continues developing well into the mid-20s, especially the parts responsible for judgment, impulse control, and long-term thinking. That knowledge did not exist or did not matter when his sentence was handed down. law jegered him as an adult. Turner turned him into an old man with the end. He was no longer defined with the impulsive thinking of a teenager. He was happy di isolation, reflection, routine, and survival. He had lived longer with the certainty of death than most people live with freedom. Yet the sentence never changed. Supporters of the system argue that this consistency is its strength. The law must remain firm, they say, or it loses meaning. If them alone could undo a sentence, then punishment would depend on patence, not responsibility. Critics saw something else. There is a system that cannot adapt. On that phrases people at their worst moment and refuses to acknowledge growth, change, or the wake of each respond waiting. They argued that the waiting itself became a punishment the jury ever formally imposed, but she disclaimed justice. Neither can fully explain what it means to live a legitimate knowing exactly how it will end. In the years after the execution, the case is stated in articles and documentaries. Students study it, advocates reference it. Viewers watch it and read, often with the same mix of shock and silence. Some say, like now the sentence, appears simply, but did the sentence know him? That tension never resolves. What the story leaves behind is not a clear answer, but a mirror. It forces society to look at how punishment works when time becomes the main instrument, when waiting replaces again, when a promise made to a teenager is fulfilled only after that teenager has lived early and entire adult life. The boy sentenced to the never reached middle age. German who was executed had already lived through the behind bars. Between those two factual is a legitimate that cannot go undone, explained away, or neatly justified, and that is the quick truth at the center of the story. The judge said that a man was sentenced at 19 and executed at 56 but had the space between those ages mattered, even if the system never knew how to measure it. That space was his level, and once it was over,